I sit here in the dim light of my living room, the shadows dancing across the walls like ghosts from my past. The silence is deafening, yet it echoes with the words that haunt me. You're a burden. Those words, spoken by my daughter-in-law, cut deeper than any knife. They linger in the air, a testament to the pain of aging and the loneliness that can seep into the heart like an unwelcome chill. I never thought I would hear such a thing from someone I once welcomed into my family with open arms. Before I continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story reaches. I am Eleanor, an elderly woman who has lived a life filled with joy, sorrow, and secrets. At 78, I find myself at a crossroads, grappling with the reality of being seen as a burden rather than a cherished member of my family. It's hard to reconcile the vibrant woman I once was with the frail image I see in the mirror today. My hair, once a rich chestnut, is now a silvery halo that frames my face, and my hands, which once crafted meals with love, now tremble slightly as I pour my tea. I often wonder if I am still the same person inside, or if I have become just a shadow of my former self. That fateful day, as I sat in the living room, I overheard my daughter-in-law, Linda, talking to my son, Mark. I had just returned from a brief outing, a small victory in my otherwise quiet life. I was proud of myself for managing to get out and breathe the fresh air, but that pride quickly wilted when I caught the tail end of their conversation. "It's not fair to us, Mark. She's a burden. We can't keep doing this." Those words pierced through me like a cold wind, freezing me in place. I felt invisible, as if I had suddenly become a mere object in their lives, something to be discarded when inconvenient. I had always prided myself on being independent, raising my son with love and care, ensuring he had everything he needed to thrive. But now I was left wondering where I had gone wrong. Did I not give enough? Did I not teach him the values of compassion and understanding? The feelings of abandonment washed over me like a tidal wave, pulling me under and leaving me gasping for air. I had always feared this moment, the moment when I would be deemed irrelevant, and here it was, crashing down on me. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I found myself retreating further into the confines of my home, the walls closing in around me like a suffocating embrace. I spent hours sitting in my favorite chair, staring out the window, watching the world continue without me. Children played outside, laughter ringing through the air, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped my home. I felt like a ghost, haunting the very life I once cherished. I often thought back to my youth, to the woman I was before life's burdens began to weigh me down. I was vibrant, full of dreams and aspirations. I had friends, laughter, and a family that adored me. But as the years passed, those things began to slip away, one by one, like grains of sand through my fingers. I remember the joy of hosting family gatherings, the aroma of roasted turkey filling the air, and the sound of my son's laughter echoing through the halls. Those moments were the highlights of my life, the memories I clung to when the world began to dim. But now, those memories felt tainted. I could almost hear the echoes of my past self, reminding me of the warmth and love that once surrounded me. I felt a longing for those days, a nostalgia that was almost painful in its intensity. I wondered if my son remembered those moments, or if they had been overshadowed by the weight of responsibility that came with adulthood. It was in this haze of despair that I stumbled upon an old box tucked away in the attic. The box was dusty, forgotten, and covered in cobwebs, much like the memories it contained. As I pulled it down and opened it, I was greeted by a wave of nostalgia. Inside were letters, photographs, and mementos from a life well lived. Each item told a story, a fragment of my past that I had tucked away in the corners of my mind. I found a photograph of my late husband George, his smile as warm as I remembered. He had always believed in me, in my strength and resilience. I could almost hear his voice, encouraging me to rise above the pain and find my purpose again. As I sifted through the contents of the box, I came across a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to me in George's familiar handwriting. My heart raced as I unfolded it, the scent of his cologne still lingering in the paper. The letter spoke of love, dreams, and the future we had envisioned together. It reminded me of the strength we had as a couple, the battles we fought side by side, and the unwavering support we provided one another. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me as I realized that despite the darkness surrounding me, I had once known love and happiness. The more I delved into the box, the more I began to remember who I was. I recalled the woman who danced in the rain, who laughed until her sides hurt, and who believed that life was meant to be lived fully, regardless of age. I felt a stirring within me, a desire to reclaim my identity and not let my daughter-in-law's words define me. I had spent too long allowing others to dictate my worth, and it was time to take back control. As I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of my past, I made a vow to myself. I would not be a burden. I would be a beacon of strength for my family. I would confront Linda, not in anger, but with the hope of understanding. I wanted to share with her the woman I used to be, the woman who still resided within me, waiting to be awakened. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to bridge the gap that had formed between us. In the days that followed, I began to take small steps toward reclaiming my life. I started taking walks around the neighborhood, greeting neighbors, and soaking in the sun's warmth. I returned to my kitchen, experimenting with recipes I had long forgotten, filling my home with the aromas of love and nostalgia. Each meal I prepared became a reminder of my worth, a testament to the love I still had to give. I even began writing again, pouring my heart onto the pages as I reflected on my life and the lessons I had learned along the way. But beneath the surface, the tension between Linda and me loomed like a dark cloud. I could sense her discomfort whenever I entered a room, the way she would shift her gaze or avoid conversation. It hurt, but I refused to let it deter me. I wanted to show her that I was not a burden, but rather a source of wisdom and love. I wanted her to see that aging did not diminish my value. Instead, it added depth to my character and stories to share. As I prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I wanted to approach the conversation with an open heart, ready to listen and understand her perspective. I hoped she would do the same for me. I couldn't help but wonder if she too felt the weight of expectations and responsibilities. Did she see me as a burden, or was it her own fears that manifested in her words? I wanted to unravel the layers of misunderstanding that had built up between us, to find common ground and rebuild our relationship. I remember the day I decided to speak to her. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that seemed to promise new beginnings. I invited Linda over for tea, my hands trembling slightly as I prepared the table. I set out my best china, hoping to create an atmosphere of warmth and acceptance. When she arrived, I could sense the tension in the air, thick and palpable. We exchanged pleasantries, but I could feel the unspoken words hanging between us, waiting to be addressed. As we sat down, I took a deep breath, summoning the courage I had mustered over the past few weeks. "Linda," I began, my voice steady but soft, "I want to talk about what you said the other day." I watched as her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but your words struck a chord that I can't ignore." I paused, searching her eyes for understanding. "I want to share my story with you, to show you that I am more than just a burden." The conversation unfolded slowly, like a delicate dance. I shared my memories, the laughter and love that had filled my life, and the struggles that had shaped me into the woman I was today. I spoke of my fears, my loneliness, and my desire to be seen and valued. I could see the walls around Linda begin to crack as she listened, her defenses lowering as she absorbed my words. We talked about our expectations, our fears, and the weight of responsibility that often felt overwhelming. As the conversation deepened, I could sense a shift in the energy between us. Linda began to share her own struggles, her own fears of inadequacy, and the pressures of being a caretaker. I realized then that we were not so different after all. We were both navigating the complexities of life, trying to find our place in a world that often felt unforgiving. I could see the burden lift from her shoulders as she spoke, and I felt a sense of connection forming between us. By the time we finished our tea, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had opened a door to understanding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hope blooming within me. I knew this was just the beginning of a journey, but it was a journey I was willing to embark on. I was determined to rebuild my relationship with Linda, to show her that I was not a burden, but a source of strength and love. As I sat back in my chair, reflecting on our conversation, I realized that I had taken a significant step toward reclaiming my identity. I was no longer just Eleanor, the elderly woman who felt invisible. I was Eleanor, a woman with a rich history, a story worth sharing. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to embrace the life that still lay ahead of me. I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way, armed with the knowledge that I was not alone. In the days that followed, I continued to nurture my relationship with Linda, finding small ways to connect and share our lives. We began to spend more time together, cooking, laughing, and sharing stories. I could see her warmth returning, the shadows of doubt and fear slowly dissipating. I felt a sense of fulfillment as I watched her open up, revealing the layers of her own struggles and insecurities. It was a beautiful exchange, one that reminded me of the power of vulnerability and understanding. But even amidst this newfound connection, the mystery of my past lingered in the background, waiting to be unraveled. I felt a pull to dig deeper into the stories that had shaped my family, to understand the roots of our relationships and the secrets that had been buried for far too long. I knew that understanding my past would not only help me heal, but might also provide the key to bridging the gap between Linda and me. And so I embarked on a journey of discovery, determined to uncover the truth of my family's history. Little did I know that the answers I sought would lead me down a path filled with revelations, challenges, and ultimately a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to be a family. It was a journey I was ready to take, armed with the knowledge that I was not a burden, but a beacon of love and resilience, ready to face whatever lay ahead. I often find myself sitting in my favorite chair, staring out the window as the world continues to spin without me. The sun rises and sets, people come and go, but I feel as though I am stuck in a moment that no longer exists. My heart aches with the weight of memories that linger like shadows in the corners of my mind. I think about the day Linda called me a burden and how it shattered the fragile illusion I had built around my life. That moment was a turning point, a stark reminder that I was no longer the vibrant woman I once was. I was now an old woman, often overlooked, often forgotten. As I reflect on my life, I can't help but think about the injustices I faced. I grew up in a world that didn't always value women, especially those who had aged. My mother was a strong woman, but she too faced her share of struggles. I remember the way her hands would tremble as she prepared dinner, the way her laughter would sometimes turn into a cough, and how she would always urge me to find my voice. "Never let anyone silence you, Eleanor," she would say, her eyes filled with a fierce determination. I held on to those words, but as I grew older, I found it increasingly difficult to be heard. When I married Harold, I thought I had found my place in the world. He was a kind man, and we built a life together filled with love and laughter. But as the years passed, I noticed the subtle shifts in our relationship. The conversations that once flowed freely began to dwindle. I became a caretaker, a role I embraced wholeheartedly, but I also felt myself fading into the background. I often wondered if I had become invisible, not just to Harold, but to the world around me. After Harold passed, I was adrift. My son, David, and his wife Linda stepped in to help, but I felt like an intruder in their lives. I remember the day they invited me to move in with them. Their home was warm and welcoming, but I could sense the underlying tension. I wanted to be a part of their family, to share in their joys and sorrows, but I often felt like a ghost haunting their lives. David tried to reassure me, but I could see the weariness in his eyes. He was juggling work, family, and me, and I hated feeling like I was weighing him down. There were moments when I would catch Linda's gaze, and I could see the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that I wasn't trying to be a burden, but the words never seemed to form. Instead, I would retreat into my shell, hoping to remain unnoticed, hoping to avoid adding to her stress. But the truth is, I longed for connection. I wanted to share my stories, my laughter, my love. I wanted to feel valued, not just as a mother-in-law, but as a person. The day she called me a burden was etched into my memory like a scar. I had been trying to help her in the kitchen, offering to chop vegetables, but my hands trembled and I accidentally dropped a knife. It clattered to the floor and I felt the air grow heavy with tension. Linda's voice cut through the silence like a knife itself. "Eleanor, you're just a burden." Why can't you see that? Those words hung in the air, suffocating me. I could feel my heart shatter into a million pieces, each fragment echoing the pain of abandonment. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but all I could do was nod silently, tears streaming down my cheeks. In that moment, I felt the weight of my years, the loneliness that had crept into my soul, and the realization that I was not just a burden to Linda, but to myself. I had allowed my identity to dissolve into the roles I played, and I was terrified of what that meant for my future. After that day, I retreated further into myself. I spent hours lost in memories, sifting through the remnants of my past. I thought about my childhood, the dreams I once had, and the woman I used to be. I remembered the first time I held my son in my arms, the overwhelming love that filled my heart. I remembered the laughter we shared, the bedtime stories, and the way he would curl up beside me, seeking comfort in my presence. But as he grew older, I watched him slip away, becoming a man with his own life, his own family. I was proud of him, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. I often found solace in the little things, gardening, knitting, and even baking. I poured my heart into those activities, hoping to create something beautiful, something that would connect me to the world outside my walls. But even those moments of joy were tinged with sadness. I would bake cookies for David and Linda, but I could see the way Linda's eyes would glaze over as she accepted them, her smiles strained. I wanted to believe that my efforts mattered, but deep down, I feared they were just reminders of how out of place I felt. As the days turned into weeks, I became more and more isolated. I would sit by the window, watching the world go by, feeling like a spectator in my own life. The laughter of children playing outside reminded me of the joy I once had, the joy I longed to feel again. I wanted to reach out, to connect with my family, but the fear of rejection held me back. I felt trapped in a cycle of despair, and I didn't know how to break free. It was during one of those long, lonely afternoons that I stumbled upon an old box in the attic. It was dusty and forgotten, hidden beneath layers of time. I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. What secrets lay within? I took a deep breath and opened the box, revealing a treasure trove of memories, photographs, letters, and mementos from my past. As I sifted through the contents, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me, each item a reminder of the life I once lived. There were photographs of Harold and me, young and carefree, our smiles bright and full of hope. I could almost hear our laughter echoing through time as I traced my fingers over the images. There were letters from friends and family, words of encouragement and love that had long been forgotten. Each piece told a story, a chapter of my life that I had tucked away, but now they were resurfacing, calling me back to who I was. Among the items, I found a small locket, its surface tarnished but still beautiful. I opened it to reveal a picture of my mother and me taken on the day of my wedding. I could feel the warmth of her embrace, the love that radiated from her eyes. I remembered the way she had looked at me that day, filled with pride and hope for my future. In that moment, I realized that I had a legacy to uphold, a story to continue. As I held the locket in my hands, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. I was not just Eleanor, the burden. I was Eleanor, a woman with a rich history. I had faced challenges, yes, but I had also triumphed. I had loved and been loved, and I still had so much to offer. It was time to reclaim my voice, to step out of the shadows and into the light. The discovery of that box was a turning point for me. It reignited a spark of determination that I thought had long been extinguished. I began to write down my memories, to reflect on the lessons I had learned and the love I had shared. I poured my heart into those pages, weaving together the tapestry of my life. And as I did, I felt the weight of my burdens begin to lift. I started to reach out to Linda, sharing my stories and memories with her. I invited her to sit with me, to listen to the tales of my past, and slowly I could see her walls begin to crumble. We would sit together, surrounded by the remnants of my life, and I would share the lessons my mother had taught me. I spoke of resilience, of love, and of the importance of understanding one another. I could see the flicker of recognition in Linda's eyes, the realization that I was not just a burden, but a woman with a story worth telling. As we shared those moments, I could feel the tension easing between us. The misunderstandings that had once separated us began to dissolve, replaced by a newfound understanding. I saw Linda not just as my daughter-in-law, but as a woman navigating her own challenges, her own fears. We were both trying to find our place in a world that often felt unforgiving, and in that shared struggle, I felt a connection forming. The journey was not easy, and there were still moments of doubt and fear, but with each conversation, I felt myself becoming more visible, more alive. I was no longer just Eleanor, the woman who felt like a burden. I was Eleanor, a storyteller, a survivor. I learned to embrace my past, to honor the memories that shaped me, and in doing so, I found the strength to face the future. As I continued to uncover the secrets of my past, I realized that my journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to unravel, truths to confront, and connections to strengthen. I was determined to dig deeper, to understand the roots of my family's history, and to find the answers that had eluded me for so long. With each passing day, I felt a sense of purpose growing within me. I was ready to reclaim my identity, to embrace the woman I had become. I wanted to show Linda and myself that I was not a burden, but a source of strength and love. I was Eleanor, a woman with a story, and it was time for that story to be heard. The moment I found that old wooden box, my heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It was tucked away in the corner of my closet, hidden beneath layers of clothing that I hadn't worn in years. Dust motes danced in the sunlight as I pulled it out, the weight of it heavy with memories. The box was unremarkable on the outside, but I could feel the stories it held within. I placed it on my lap, my fingers trembling as I brushed away the dust. As I opened the lid, a rush of nostalgia enveloped me. Inside were letters, photographs, and trinkets, pieces of my life that I had long forgotten. There were snapshots of my younger self, laughing with friends, holding my son as a baby, and even a faded picture of my wedding day. Each item was a portal to a moment in time, and I felt as though I was being transported back to those days when I was vibrant and full of dreams. The first letter I picked up was from my mother. Her elegant handwriting flowed across the page, filled with love and wisdom. She had written it to me on my 21st birthday, a time when I was filled with hope and ambition. As I read her words, tears streamed down my cheeks. She spoke of the importance of resilience, of facing life's challenges with grace. "You are stronger than you know, my dear," she had written. "Never let anyone dim your light." Those words resonated with me now more than ever. I had let my light dim over the years, allowing the perceptions of others to cloud my worth. I could feel the weight of my mother's love wrapping around me like a warm embrace, reminding me that I was not just a burden, but a woman with a legacy of strength. As I continued to sift through the contents of the box, I uncovered a small locket. Inside was a picture of my late husband, Robert, with his charming smile that had once lit up my world. I held it tightly, feeling the warmth of his memory wash over me. Robert had always believed in me, even when I struggled to believe in myself. "You are a force of nature, Eleanor," he used to say, his eyes sparkling with admiration. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to be enveloped by the memories of our life together. I could hear his laughter echoing in my mind, see the way he would hold my hand when I felt lost. He had been my partner, my confidant, and my greatest supporter. Losing him had left a void in my heart, one that I had tried to fill with the love of my family, but it had never been the same. As I delved deeper into the box, I found a series of letters I had written to my son, James, when he was away at college. I had poured my heart into those pages, sharing my hopes and fears, my dreams for him. I remember the excitement I felt as he embarked on his journey, the pride swelling in my chest as I watched him grow into the man he had become. But as I read my words, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. I had always tried to be the perfect mother, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of myself. I had sacrificed so much for my family, often putting their needs above my own. I had thought it was the right thing to do, but now I questioned whether I had done more harm than good. Had I inadvertently taught my son that my worth was tied to my ability to serve? Had I conditioned him to see me as someone who could be easily dismissed, a burden that needed to be managed, rather than a person deserving of love and respect? The realization hit me hard, and I felt a mix of anger and sadness wash over me. I had dedicated my life to my family, and yet here I was, feeling invisible and unappreciated. I had allowed the narrative to shift, and now I was left grappling with the consequences. I needed to confront these feelings, to dig deeper into the roots of my pain. It was time to face the truth about my relationships, to understand why I felt like a burden, and how I could reclaim my identity. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the journey ahead. With the box as my guide, I began to write down my memories, each word a step toward healing. I reflected on the moments that had shaped me, both the joyous and the painful. I wrote about the day James was born, the overwhelming love I felt as I held him for the first time. I wrote about the sleepless nights, the worries and fears that came with motherhood. I poured out my heart, allowing the ink to flow freely as I chronicled the highs and lows of my life. As I wrote, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer just Eleanor, the woman who felt like a burden. I was Eleanor, a storyteller, a woman with a rich tapestry of experiences. I realized that my worth was not defined by how others perceived me, but by the love I had given and the strength I had shown throughout my life. The more I wrote, the more I uncovered. I remembered the times when I had felt abandoned, moments when my family had overlooked my needs. I thought about the times James had been too busy with his own life to check in on me. the moments when I had felt like an afterthought. I also remembered Linda's harsh words, the moment that had shattered my heart. But as I reflected on these experiences, I began to see them through a new lens. I understood that Linda was navigating her own struggles, her own fears about being a caregiver. She had never seen me as I truly was, just as I had failed to see her. We were both trapped in our perceptions, unable to break free from the cycle of misunderstanding. It was time to change that. I decided to confront Linda, to share my journey with her, to show her that I was not just a burden, but a woman with a story worth hearing. I wanted her to understand the depth of my experiences, the love that had shaped me, and the resilience that had carried me through. One afternoon, I invited Linda over for tea. As she entered my home, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the uncertainty in her eyes. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but as we sat across from each other, the words caught in my throat. "Linda," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I need to talk to you about something important." She looked at me, her expression guarded, but I could see a flicker of curiosity. "I found an old box filled with memories," I continued, my heart racing, "and it made me realize how much I've kept hidden, how much I've suffered in silence." Linda's brow furrowed, and I could see her walls beginning to crack. "I've felt like a burden," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I've felt invisible, like I no longer matter. But I want you to know that I'm still here, still fighting to find my place in this world." Tears welled in my eyes as I spoke, and I could see Linda's expression soften. "I've made mistakes, and I know you felt overwhelmed," I continued, "but I want us to understand each other, to bridge the gap between us. I want you to know my story, to see me for who I truly am." For a moment, there was silence between us, a heavy pause filled with unspoken words. Then Linda spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Eleanor," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was just scared. I didn't know how to handle everything, and I took it out on you." I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I listened to her words. We were both vulnerable, both seeking understanding. "I'm sorry for not reaching out sooner," I replied, my heart swelling with compassion. "I've been lost in my own pain, and I didn't realize how much we needed each other." As we talked, the tension that had once filled the room began to dissipate. We shared our fears, our hopes, and our dreams. I told her about my memories, the lessons my mother had taught me, and the love I still held for my family. Slowly, I could see the barriers between us crumbling. Linda began to share her own struggles, the weight of her responsibilities, and the fears that had haunted her. We were both navigating a difficult path, and in that shared understanding, I felt a new connection forming. Our conversation stretched into the evening, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. I was no longer just Eleanor, the woman who felt like a burden. I was Eleanor, a survivor, a woman with a story that needed to be told. In the days that followed, I continued to write, to reflect on my journey and the lessons I had learned. I reached out to James, sharing my newfound perspective and inviting him to reconnect. I wanted him to see me as more than just his mother. I wanted him to understand the woman I had become. As I poured my heart into those letters, I felt a sense of liberation. I was no longer defined by my past or the perceptions of others. I was Eleanor, a woman with strength and resilience, and I was ready to embrace my future. I began to find joy in the little things again, sipping tea in the garden, watching the birds flit about, and laughing with Linda as we shared stories of our lives. I started to reclaim my identity, to honor the memories that shaped me while also forging new paths forward. One afternoon, as I sat in my garden, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had faced my fears, confronted the pain of the past, and emerged stronger. I was no longer just a woman who felt like a burden. I was a storyteller, a survivor, a beacon of hope. And as I looked up at the sky, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were still mysteries to unravel, truths to confront, and connections to strengthen. But I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I was not alone. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and I whispered a silent promise to myself. I would never give up on hope. I would continue to share my story, to connect with others, and to remind myself that I was worthy of love and respect. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I began to volunteer at the local community center, sharing my experiences with others who had faced similar struggles. I wanted to show them that they were not alone, that their stories mattered, and that it was never too late to reclaim their voices. I found joy in connecting with others, hearing their stories, and offering support. I became a mentor, a friend, and a source of strength for those who needed it. I realized that by sharing my journey, I could inspire others to embrace their own stories and find hope in the darkest of times. And as I continued to write, to reflect, and to connect, I felt a sense of fulfillment that I had long thought lost. I was Eleanor, a woman who had faced the depths of despair and emerged stronger, and I was determined to keep shining my light for others to see. If my story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people never give up on hope.